All right, guys, are you wondering who you should vote for in city council race this coming election? Where we're going to go over our candidate for District 8 in here just a second. We've got our special guest, Rich DePalma, and we're joined with my office manager, Tracey. So join us in just a second as we go through what Rich has to offer to our city and city council. Welcome to Behind the Scenes with Spyglass Realty with Ryan Rodenbeck and Matt Edwards. Get your headphones on. All right, so we are here with Tracey, my office manager, right-hand woman, and Rich DePalma. So, Sunny, one of your kids is in baseball?
No, my daughter was in class with Rich's youngest son, Nate, a couple of times, and they're cute little friends.
Yeah.
His wife is wonderful too, so he comes with a good set of people around him. And he's running for city council in District 8, which is in Southwest Austin, which is where I live too. So when I heard he was running, I immediately thought, this is somebody we need to get on the show.
Yeah, so, city politics is one of the, it's the only politics that I get involved in. Really, everything else is just kind of shut off. But I think that I think that we've got a low voter turnout, and I think this election is a pretty big opportunity for Austin to really back some candidates. I mean, so, correct me if I'm wrong, but the average voter age in Austin is over 60, right?
That's a great question. I haven't looked at for the overall city. For our district, it's actually younger.
Yeah.
Because we do have so many single families.
Yeah.
But it ranges, there's a pretty big range where you kind of have these, depending upon which neighborhoods, where you have these averages.
Well, and I believe last time I heard, I remember during it was kind of the Uber Lyft debate a couple of years ago, that the average voter age was over 60, which is an issue because, one of the issues that we talk about in Austin, which is a big deal, is affordability. And affordability, in my opinion, comes from lot density. One of the issues that we're having is that when you have, especially in central Austin, where the average voter age is over 60, we have the most vocal neighborhood activists are the ones that are voting. And so I can understand why some city council have to like who is going to elect me? When I say that, who's actually going to go vote for me, right? Well, I think we have a real opportunity right now because we've got this phenomenon called Beto, right? Yeah. And he's probably the biggest thing, whether you like him or you do not. I think we're going to have a better voter turnout in this election, and that would really help us push the candidates that are going to be helpful with responsible growth in Austin, right?
Right.
So let's talk about, the latest issues that have occurred, with Code Next. Walk us through that. Tell us what your understanding of it was. I've got a sense of it, but
sure.
I
mean, this is where we have an instance of a product being baked.
Mm-hmm.
And I served on the AIC Facilities and Bond Planning Advisory Committee for our 2017 successful bond, which was a relief. And during that point, though, we were doing a facilities master plan. And when you're doing the facilities master plan, you are coming through different drafts.
Mm-hmm.
And, folks, understandably so, they react to the draft. I've done it in the past as well when I see draft documents. And I remember when 10-1 first came up and they had the draft maps. And I went to the meetings after that because I thought Oak Hill and Southwest Austin was going to be negatively impacted. And so we've had a lot of voices who were scared or nervous, who didn't know. And then some leaders in the community, particularly in Old Austin, who have raised concerns, and some valid, and some, I got to question.
Yeah.
I got to really question what the intent was. But at the same time, when you have folks on the other far extreme who have said, we need to build on parks, then that adds fuel to the fire, what the intent is. And so I think we had so much agenda rhetoric that it really did kill that process, and we didn't see what that final product would have looked like.
Yeah.
And who knows? We all may have been, once we saw the final product from the city council, we may have said, yeah, they fixed all the issues.
Mm-hmm.
Or we would have been, we gotta go draft 4. I always call for draft 4 just because the first draft was just, it should have never been released.
Yeah.
This was an F on anybody's standard. Right?
Yeah, sure.
Draft 2 had some really great components, and so you had what were transact zones. And people had some concerns with it, but then they went totally in a different direction in draft 3. And so people were giving feedback on draft 3, not knowing how it was going to be realized, and I think that's where kind of the fear was. But there's a lot of great information. That $8.5 million is not all gone for anything.
Mm-hmm.
The council has directed City Manager Cronk to come back in February with a process on how we move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And so the green water infrastructure, what they call beneficial use, the chapter was phenomenal. This is how how using your berms and swells and stormwater collection systems to actually help beautify the city, and then also helps mitigate the stormwater impact that you have. And so those are some of the things that you have in there. But then we're going to have to address what you had talked about on the density side.
Yeah.
And if we're going to move forward with Imagine Austin, which is transit corridors, and you have the density, and you have your neighborhood centers, then we're going to have to make that move forward.
Yeah.
Now the question is going to be how can we marry the existing neighborhood plans, because it's a huge concern. It's not so much in Southwest Austin. I think in Southwest Austin, our neighborhood plans are pretty much in line with the vision.
Yeah.
What we were getting, unfortunately, some of our ordinances aren't in line with the vision.
Yeah.
But but there's going to be some sort of discussions relating to that.
Yeah.
We know that what I said when I was on Parks Board, not Parks Board, on the AIC Facilities and Bond Planning Advisory Committee. When you want to have that sort of academic programming, you have to have enough butts and seats to order that academic programming to make it work out. Same thing with transit. If you want to have that public transit and have those great transit options, you have to have enough butts and seats on that bus, or whatever, or on light rail in order to make it work out. And the way you get those butts and seats in everywhere, it's not nobody's trying to figure it out. You can see, if you look at metropolitan cities across the United States, and it is dense transit corridors, the way that gives you enough bodies there, and so folks can go ahead and come over to.
So we can't have enough butts and seats because we don't have enough people living in the central core because there's not enough room for them because they cannot afford it, right? And speaking of affording, I've got to tell you, if you're watching this on Facebook and you want to subscribe to future broadcasts, type the word agent in the comment section. Give us a like, share it if you feel like it. If you're watching on YouTube, feel free to subscribe. Also, last week we did a broadcast showing how to buy, renovate, and cash flow duplexes. Kelly's going to put a link to austinduplexagent.com where you can get our ebook on that. And I just thought of that with lot density because it's I think you and I were talking about this before, but without any variance, if you're building on a residential lot, you can build 2 to 3 to 4 at the most, right? And in that scope, you have your impervious cover. Without any variances, it's something like 750 to 800 square feet is the smallest unit you can build without special circumstances or variances. And that was okay in the 70s, 80s, possibly the 90s. But we're seeing stuff right now where, was it just yesterday, Threadgill's is closing, and that's only part of it. But was it another restaurant closed a few weeks ago because they couldn't get enough people to work there, right? And so this problem is just going to balloon from there because we need to have blue-collar, working-class citizens be able to live in central Austin, Kelly, will you close that door?
I could do.
Okay.
So the challenge, and this is the challenge for everybody who's watching, I want you to go talk to your clerk who's at the grocery store, the person who's cutting your hair, whoever is rendering you some sort of service, and I want you to ask them, where do you live? And it's a regular exercise for me, and the results are 90% of the time they are coming elsewhere. As far as in my case, New Braunfels. So if we say like, wow, we have a transportation issue. Well, no kidding. When we're placing people outside of the city, of course we're going to have a transportation.
These two issues are directly linked: transportation and affordability. Well, and it all revolves around lot density. If I have and it's the kind of thing with Code Next, but if I'm a block away from Lamar or a block away from Burnett or any one of these essential corridors, I should be able to build on a 0.20, even 0.15 acre, a eightplex there. I mean, people in Chicago and New York are living in 500 square feet fairly comfortably. So
yeah, I mean, and when we're looking at, we have to build up the transit corridors. There's no doubt about it. And when we do so, we also have to be mindful of the stormwater reclamation systems, which we got underneath this last version of Code Next, because if the more impervious cover that you take up, of course, then you're going to have flooding issues too. So, but this is how we marry the two together.
Yeah.
And we have to have the conversation relating to what the parking requirement is.
Yeah.
Because now, if you're in a real transit corridor, or if you're say going, the urban core is expanding out.
Yeah.
And if you are a millennial and you're outside of that, or even if you're a retiree and you want to go ahead and have that downtown lifestyle.
Yeah.
It is a burden to actually own a car these days, and similar to those, like I lived in San Francisco in my 20s, and that was the worst thing in the world to own a car.
Yeah,
you didn't need to do it. Right now, I'm seeing a lot of folks who are taking. You can go right now, and you'll see people going in and leaving work on the scooters, electric scooters.
Yeah.
So we're really seeing how transportation needs. Transportation availability is changing. Innovation is really changing on how that commuting pattern is, and what the need for that parking requirement is. Because there's nothing more frustrating when you're going to a building, at least for me, because you can think of that sort of housing, right?
Yeah.
And you just see empty spaces.
Yeah.
Now, at the same time, we still have to be careful in making sure that there's certain areas in certain circumstances that hopefully the market will drive that, we're going to make sure you have that number of parking spaces. But, we have to figure out what does that policy look like in case the market fails to drive.
Yeah.
What's that consideration look like? But we have a lot of opportunity. But I want to talk to you specifically on density, like in Southwest Austin. And what does that mean? Because it scares some people. It's interesting, because they think what's going to happen. Like in my neighborhood, they think they're going to tear down a single family home and build a 4-story, multi-family, multi-apartment housing. And that's not the case.
It never was the case.
It was never the case.
Yeah.
Now, if you're an older neighborhood, maybe that they are going to put a duplex in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And or maybe if it's a quadplex, but it's going to be context specific. And that's where it's interesting. I've driven through West Austin, and there's one group of 4. It's a quadplex. They're all separate though. I guess maybe it's their individual townhomes.
Sure.
But this was created on a spot that had to be a normal single family home at one point. Mm-hmm. And they're small units, and then they have an anti-Code Next sign out.
Yeah.
Here's what they were trying to do.
Yeah.
To some extent. And even to me, I was like, wow, that's too many units on that property.
Yeah.
And so this is where we're trying to have it. And in Southwest, though, the two challenges that I'm seeing that we're facing is our seniors. Mm-hmm. And it's very. I want people to really take this away, because if you're not knocking on doors, you don't see the amount of folks who are isolated, who are living in a larger single-family home because they have nowhere else to go. Their support network is there, or their doctors are there. It's the only neighborhood that they've been in for 30 years.
Yeah,
and that's the problem. And when we don't, one close friend of mine, a couple, they lived in Southwest Austin for probably about 35 years, been married over 50 years. And because there's no senior housing available, like the openings, her husband was over off of Manchac, and so she's, as the dutiful wife, she's going 2 to 3 times a day to visit him. And in the meantime, she has her single family home that she's having to take care of, and there should be that option within everybody's communities.
I just sold a home off in 3.7 or 3.6 actually, and to a guy who was, his wife had just passed, and so he was moving on to senior living. Lived in Oak Hill for 35 years, and he had to move. To get a place nice enough that kind of fit their, his needs and his wants. It's way up off like north of 183.
Yeah, there's.
I was like, why are you moving so far?
We are
Like,
failing our seniors across the
Yeah.
city. And we're definitely, when you look at the amount of SF1 housing that we have in Southwest Austin, and that's what gets permitted, we are absolutely failing our community in a big way. And it's going to, it's already, I already feel bad enough the fact that we don't have senior center in Southwest Austin, and so it just adds to that isolation. So it's something we got to solve, but it's not the only side. On the flip side, we have so many young families, and 53% of marriages nationally end in divorce. And there has been more moms in my living room, and I'll get choked up on this, where 2 to 4 kids, and they're, talking to my wife, and what are we going to do?
Yeah.
And because this, not only are they going to have to move, in some cases they don't, but most cases they do. They have to move, and now that mom's support network is there in the area.
Yeah.
So now she's without a support network, and we're worried about when we talk about these systematic solutions like transportation, but the education is the other thing. And so now we're putting these kids. And I came from, my parents had divorced, and it's a trying time for them, like that year and a half. And so now we're putting them in a new school with new friends because we don't have the available affordable housing stock.
No, you're exactly right. So, and I think what this comes back down to is like what we lack in Austin is a city council, largely, that is acceptable to reasonable change in our zoning, in our regulations, and I think it's a problem. And that brings us to another topic that I'm pretty passionate about, which is short-term rentals. A few years ago, we had short-term rentals, and the city of Austin put out regulations, which I thought were fantastic in the sense.
And this is Councilmember Riley's record.
Well, I'm talking pre-moratorium, right?
And I think this is I think this is what Councilmember Riley at the time.
Yeah,
who happens to be one of my supporters. But I think he put out there. So it set goals for neighborhoods.
I think it's 5% per zip code. Look,
that's right.
I get behind the argument that you don't want your entire zip code that full of short-term housing, and basically hotels everywhere, right? But when you're telling me that, like, I got one of the last permits on one of my duplexes on Burleson, and I turned it into a short-term rental. We have not had any problems. None, right? Like, I have had shitty tenants in one of those duplexes that were just partying, long-term tenants, right? That were just partying all night, they're leaving their trash on the front, they park in the street. I've had it all, right? If I have a crappy tenant on that Burleson one, that short-term rental, it's for 1 to 3 nights. And then if I want to flag them as a bad tenant, then no one's going to rent to them again.
Right.
So, I think it's really irresponsible of our city to have completely washed that away. I also believe that this is a good option for people. Like, one of my neighbors is recently divorced. He's wanting to move somewhere closer but smaller. Does not want to sell his house right now. Why shouldn't he be able to rent that out if there's no other? This is a direct neighbor. I don't even care. I just know that he's going to be responsible with it. And I think at the time when all this moratorium went down, there were like a couple of bad actors, right? They had identified, 3 or 4 houses that were just really irresponsible for renting to, So what is your stance on that?
Very good. So one, I would have to look at the data. I remember when that was all happening in front of council. I have not looked as far as what the data said, and I'm very data driven.
Yeah.
And so if the data says, yes, we had specific areas during specific times of the years, and it's something we need to address. We don't let bad policy stay for bad policy.
Yeah.
And this is regardless of whatever it is.
Yeah.
The fact that you've done it and okay, next, you have to go back and review to see what the effectiveness of any city policy.
Yeah.
I had a great conversation with APD, or actually the Police Officers Association, on one of their policies that they were talking about. It's the exact same thing. So we have to go back and revisit to see, was the intent, has it met the intent?
Yeah.
And then go and just modify. It's okay to modify. And so that would be something we'd have to look actually at the data set. I do know there's some concerns that has been expressed to me, again, unless it's a lot of my school service, where the more short-term rentals you have in a concentration of a neighborhood, particularly surrounding a neighborhood school, then it drops enrollment, and that's bad for the school. So you'd have to marry that policy with those concerns and see where it's at.
Put it with a drug zone,
reasonable.
like there's reasonable.
Well, and it could be even something where you're talking about your corridors, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, if you,
Exactly.
maybe all of a sudden you have these transit corridors and it's open for STR altogether.
Yeah.
The other component, though, is more that we has to be brought in. We have to look at the data set, part of the conversation. Affordability, we've all talked about, as a major issue. When you take housing stock out for STR, then you're reducing your overall housing stock and potentially driving up the market a little bit. But I'd have to see the data, see if does that really, is it the percentage that would actually move the needle or not?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, another failed policy. Do you want to add something?
I was just going to say too, I'd be interested to see the data on then compared to now, only because it seems like the market has gotten so much better at regulating that system itself. Airbnb, if you've worked with Airbnb or HomeAway, they've come a long way in 5 years.
They have, yeah.
And so, I think that it's probably, eliminated some of the problems in itself. So it might start to be a self-regulated situation to where it didn't need as much.
One other thing that would be helpful, if you're one other policymaker, not just, if it was me or somebody else or the rest of the council, coming forward, maybe working with a board to look at what the, always keeping up in front of the national trends or national policies of what it's showing.
Yeah.
Anything we can keep from having to spend money to do our own analysis and use the existing data set, plugging into the model and saying, this is a framework, going into whatever that city is to see what's working, what's not with the particular ordinance that you've done. Yeah. That helps drive a quicker decision.
Well, and when this was going on, I had discussions with some people at Airbnb, and when there was
Matt Curtis.
Well, I don't even know. Somebody just called me, but what he was saying was like if you remove all short-term rentals on investor-owned properties, what you're creating, when this, if and when this is all done, is that you're going to have to hire 50,000 code enforcement people because you're never going to be able to regulate it.
No, and that is a major concern. A lot of different things. Anytime we create that additional regulation, and I think there is a place for regulations.
Sure, me too.
Health and safety, absolutely.
Yeah,
but we always have to evaluate. One, do we have the ability to regulate, or is it going to be an unfunded, like what we get from the state pretty often, is an unfunded mandate?
Yeah.
And then what's that actual cost and what's the implementation? And this is something that is very real in the city of Austin, particularly what code compliance has on their plate, or could potentially have on their plate.
So something else I wanted to ask you about, it just came up with a board meeting for a board, was like, we were talking about or not a board meeting, outside the board meeting, but like the ECAD, okay? Which is our energy audit. And, there are certain regulations, policies that are put forth that like when I first look at them, I'm like, it doesn't really make sense. And then I go back and like, okay, that made a little sense. And what I mean by that, like for instance, the bag ban, like when that first came out, I was like, do we really need to do that? But like looking back, like, is it that hard to just not sell plastic bags? Like, it's not that bad. Yeah, right. The energy audit, looking back, how long that's been, 5 years, it's a failed project in my opinion, right? And
I've heard this.
It's just like, it's one thing if it actually led to something, but it doesn't. It's a piece of trash. Sellers they're required to do it. It's a tax on the poor, by the way, because a seller's required to spend anywhere from $150 to $300, right? That's, what do they call that? Like a transfer tax, I think. It's not really a tax, but it's one of those things that in effect it is. Yeah. And I don't know if that's anything that'll come up, but I just think that that's one of the things that if you're elected in office, you should look at it like, is the juice worth the squeeze?
Yes.
No, and that is a great point. And I'm a huge environmentalist, but I've said before, pragmatic environmentalist.
Yeah.
I love energy efficiency and what we get. And there is that balance.
Yeah.
There absolutely is the balance on what we do because of the impact of affordability.
Right.
But then also how it's executed and making sure that it's done in a way that doesn't meet the intent. So it goes back to the earlier conversation.
Yeah.
We want to be able to look at policies. And the good news is we do have an auditor's office. Corey Stokes is our city auditor, and she does a fantastic job doing audits. You just have to be instructed to do them by the council. And so this would be one area you can look at. Here's the intent, and go back to the council resolution, and go back also to the discussion. And I think this might have been Mayor Leffingwell's
initiative. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so, and I don't remember if it was while he was just city council member or mayor, but and he's very pragmatic as well. And so you're trying to get to that. I just think we figure out what that process is.
Well, and from what I heard about that was that the board of realtors, this is before I was really involved with the board, really got into this because at first that initiative was being pushed by Fox Service Company and ABC because the first draft of it was going to not only require the energy audit, but to require the seller to conform. Retroactively conform, and that's not fair. Especially people that are in tough areas of their life that have to sell. Last thing you want to do is pull out $5,000, $6,000, $10,000 for ducks. And here's the other thing about it: you're giving a opportunity for due diligence. Okay, and due diligence is largely on the buyer, right? So if people care about that, if a buyer cares about that, they should be able to have the opportunity to do that without the seller having to pay for that. And again, it all comes back to in my opinion, what has this done for our city, right? Yeah. Done nothing, right? Again,
it's made energy auditors.
Yeah. I'm quite, and I'll be honest with you, with the bag ban, that's one of those things that gosh, why were we bitching about that?
Why is the legislature taking that up?
Yeah.
So and I like the bag ban.
I do too.
Having done a lot of having co-founded Friends of Nichols Park back in 2007, and all the park cleanups, and working with Keep Awesome Beautiful on various cleanups. I love you can see it. Yeah. You can see the results. I pick up very few plastic bags. And so this would be, again, is a data-driven, looking at the analysis. What you have said is, I've heard it before, so you're not alone. And this is, you're not crazy on your feeling about it. And I've heard it from sellers. I've heard it from the real estate community, and it definitely is something that warrants taking a look at to see if there's a better way. Yeah. That you can still get what the intent was, but doing it in a more effective way that's not regressive on the impact of particular folks, like you said, who are selling at a time. When we look at it, it's a whole range of reasons why people sell. Sometimes it's moving to the bigger house or other location, or a job transfer. But in other times, it's death. It is divorce, and there's some really
job loss. Any number of things. So
one more quick thing to discuss. We've got to wrap up here soon. So the new bond that's going to be on the ticket at the same time that you're running, I got to hear a little bit about it the other morning. And give me just like a quick 2 minutes. How do you feel about it? Do you feel like they're...
Well, tell us what it is first, Sonny.
Well, it's a $925 million bond. It covers all sorts of things from affordable housing to updates to libraries, museums, parks, flood mitigation, health services, public safety, transportation infrastructure. They did mention, the task force was the panel that I heard speak, and they mentioned that it was largely a kind of maintenance bond, if you will. Yes. It helped to improve things that were already there. It doesn't have a lot of new things.
So there's still some new. So yeah,
some new, but I guess the majority of it is kind of a fixing things we have.
So on bonds, what people need to remember, or know if they don't know this, is it is like it's your loan that you're doing to repair your house.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're a homeowner and the city of Austin is the home, and we got to make some major repairs, and so you're going to take out, you're going to refinance in order to do that, and so it's that line of credit that we're going to use in order to get the work because it's capital projects.
Sure.
And that's what's required. That's why people will say, well, why are we paying this from our taxes? Well, our taxes only cover a certain amount, and it's mostly maintenance and operations, programming within the city of Austin, staff.
Right.
So.
And I think they're saying that it will increase city property taxes by 2 cents per $100. So if you have a $400,000 house, you can see like $7 extra a month. Your property tax bill is kind of something that
we're all impacted by these small.
Sure.
We got to be really careful as a city on these incremental. I mean, every year we always have a little increase. I can tell you, I think people need to vote and look at it and understand. Okay, things. And I said this this is something I realized on the school bond. If you don't fix it, there's not a magical fairy that comes around and sprinkles some dust.
It'll be a bigger problem down the road.
Yeah, and given how much capital construction is, you have those escalating costs. And so now if your bond comes every 5 to 7 years, usually a 6-year range, and you're looking at a much greater cost, and then the repair costs much more as well. Not just because of escalating costs, because it's just gotten worse. In the meantime, your community is done with that benefit. So what this bond does, so here's a couple of the projects. So $40 million for aging aquatic system. Our aquatic system has continued to decrease since 1996 when Dick Nichols was built. That was the last new pool to our aquatic system. Since then, we've closed 5 pools. We've renovated a number of pools, but we have so many more that need renovation. And if anybody questions that, go to Mabel Davis. Mabel Davis, it's an embarrassment, and it's lower socioeconomic neighborhood. The other thing I pulled out, though, an aquatics master task force, bond task force I was part of, was making sure we get a pool out in Southwest Austin because we only have one.
Yeah.
They give us credit for Barton Springs, which I love Barton Springs. So that's technically 2, but we all know that's not Southwest Austin.
Yeah.
And so these are some of the things, but it also has a new metropolitan park in Deep West Oak Hill. So that's phenomenal for us, and there's some water protection lands that's also associated with it. But there's a lot of great projects. Land isn't getting any cheaper when we do land banking for affordable housing. We know that we have an affordable housing need. We have to be more strategic on how we address it. This is how we actually can get some of that density, vertical mixed use, maybe on some of these projects. Because now the amount of money on affordable housing that we're putting here, we're able actually to drive decisions rather than just kind of leverage existing grant programs coming from the state that dictate for us what we're going to be responding to. So I think that's an exciting thing for us. But there's a lot of aging infrastructure for sure, particularly within the Parks and Recreation.
I haven't heard too much negativity about the bond. Maybe I'm just not listening enough, but it seems like it's most people seem to support it. Well, look, we're going to get running here in just a second, but so Kelly is going to put a link in the chat. If you're watching this on YouTube, there will be a link in the description box of where we can find Rich.
RichDePalma.com.
Very cool.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. If you're watching this on Facebook and you want to subscribe to future broadcasts, type the word agent in. Give us a like on Facebook. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a like and subscribe. We are not going to be here next week. I'll be in New York City for the Workplace by Facebook Customer Advisory Board. And then the next week, I'll be back with Matt. We're going to go over the 5 things that you need to know to avoid when you're buying a home in Austin. So, Rich, thanks very much.
Thank you so much for
yeah, we'll be on the lookout for you.